morning. Like Angela said, thank you for spending this Saturday morning with us. My name is Leanne Ferrer. I'm the Executive Director of Pacific Islanders in Communications. So we had received funding to do workshops to not only build our filmmaking community, but to bring people together and also to, to start creating this independent filmmaking community. We have one and it's doing great, but to build it up and to show the state of Hawaii that our filmmaking industry in Hawaii isn't just 5-0 Magnum and whatever film comes in. We are the filmmaking industry in Hawaii. So that's what we're here to do. And I just want to tell you that Pacific Islanders in Communications has been in existence since 1991. I'm a filmmaker and I am an ʻŌlelo producer member that needs to renew her membership. But I got trained somewhere else, and then I came into ʻŌlelo and took the certification courses, and they helped me with my first short film that actually played nationally, played locally here in ʻŌlelo and then played nationally on PBS. So I'm really grateful to ʻŌlelo, and I love our partnership, and I'm not going to cry. But we are having a series of workshops. This is the very first one. We go on to 8 workshops into October. So if you have not signed up, this workshop sold out in 2 days. And so if you have not signed up for the other ones, go on our Eventbrite page and sign up. Even if it's something like, I'm not sure if I'm interested in. I think just the meeting of the minds and being with all these creatives, I think that it'll get your juice going and get your project either toward the finish line or started. So thank you very much for being here. I'd like to introduce a very dear friend of mine. She actually helped us get the grant from the state of Hawaii to do these workshops. Awesome. Her name is Rebecca Soon, and she is the owner of Solutions Pacific, or the COO of Solutions Pacific, and she helps small businesses get started, get running, and what have you. And she's also a native Hawaiian lawyer, so good thing to know. But without further ado, Becky.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour, and now we have 15 minutes going through what's normally like an 8-hour, 3-day session. So what I'm hoping to do today, as Leanne mentioned, is just to kind of share some information about the logistics of what it means to start a small business. Thank you so much to everyone that gave some feedback on the SurveyMonkey. That gave me a kind of good idea about where some folks are, a little bit across the board. Some folks have businesses, but pretty much most of the folks that responded said, no, we want to start something new even if we already have something. I see some nods. So if you're like, oh man, what did I sign up for? What is this business stuff? Stick with us, it's gonna be fun. Okay, so I really want folks to feel engaged, so don't be afraid to jump up, ask a question. If you can, say it loudly so that everyone can hear and that the cameras, aloha everyone watching, can pick it up. We have some of our colleagues are outside as well, and then some folks might join watching the video later. So don't be afraid to say your question loudly, jump up if you have an idea, if you need me to go in a different direction, please feel free to. As Leanne mentioned, our company Solutions Pacific, mainly what we do is we work with community-based organizations doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So oftentimes that means working with small businesses, probably maybe 3,000 or 4,000 small businesses in Hawaii over the last 12 years that we've had the real honor of getting to work with and try to accomplish different goals. And every small business is completely different. Lots of nonprofits as well. We're super passionate about business. And that sounds really weird, I know. But what I like to say is that, small business owners, usually you folks are folks that are thinking about it, you have like great, exciting ideas to try to empower your communities in some way. And so we honestly are sort of junkies to support you folks. And so if we can help provide the back end, you folks do the sexy, we'll help you, live through the unsexy to support your ideas. And then we get to be a small part of the great work that you're doing to impact your communities. So just kind of an idea of who we are, what we do. My colleague Paula is outside as well, and so she's a resource. We have a couple of small business counselors and loan officers and folks that do sort of we call them just problem solvers. Most of us, our title is just problem solver, and so we do our best to try to help get around barriers, go through them, etc. Yeah, I can hear my voice echo. That's kind of weird, yeah. Although you folks are probably used to that from filmmakers. How many of you folks are filmmakers or in the film space? For folks that aren't, do you mind just kind of shouting out what space you're in?
Graphic designer.
Awesome. Model.
Writing and editing.
Writing and editing, okay.
Visitor industry.
Okay, wonderful. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
Camera operator, gaffer.
Say that one more time.
Camera operator.
Camera operator, okay, awesome. Okay, please, yeah.
Nonprofits executive director.
Okay, wonderful. Do you mind if I ask what kind of nonprofit or what area of work?
It's called Surfrider Spirit Sessions, and we work with at-risk youth using surfing and adult mentoring as a way of making them help make better choices in their life.
Awesome. Okay, mahalo. All right, so that was a little bit about us. I skipped ahead a little bit. So just shout out for me what folks think of when you think of what's an entrepreneur. Awesome, I love that. Creative, okay.
Someone who comes from amongst the people and able to become a leader that creates something within that community.
Cool, yeah.
Multitasker.
Multitasker, yes, for sure. Any other thoughts?
Service provider.
Service provider, okay, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, someone who finds a way to like solve a problem with the product or service,
Yeah.
and then like scale it and replicate it so that it keeps spreading and spreading,
Awesome.
and has some kind of what am I trying to say? Like save the world value or something.
Yes.
Something like that.
I
solve
love
the
this
problem.
global thinking group I have this morning. This is fantastic. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about risks. So what are folks scared of? For those that haven't started a business yet, that you're still just thinking about it, why haven't you jumped in yet? What's holding you back?
The money,
Monday. Yes.
like structure and community.
Tell me more what you mean by that.
Like, you're used to a job.
Yeah.
And like you have a group of people you see every day, and
Yeah.
so like branching out on your own, that same character, that same structure, and that same energy, and bringing your people together.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay.
It's not as easy.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Community, and we do it every day, long after we start the business, right? That keeps happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other things folks are concerned about or worried about?
Fear of doing the paperwork wrong.
Oh gosh, right? Government's on you.
Doing it alone. The burden.
Yeah, it's kind of lonely.
Yeah. That's what I meant by community too.
Yeah.
It's lonely.
Yeah. Okay. So some of the things that you folks have mentioned, a lot of them already, but for some folks, what we often hear are sort of a wide range of things. There's an initial investment, and then there's ongoing costs, right? The good news is that the actual logistics of setting up the business are not that expensive. It's not that big of a barrier to it. Now it's adding the meat, building the community, getting the clients in. That's the part that can take quite a bit of additional work and monetary resources. There's an opportunity cost. So for those that may have other careers or other work that you're doing, or maybe you're working for another business right now, the risk of jumping out on your own, right? And that opportunity cost of, okay, are you ready and willing? Is there enough there that you can take the leap and leave what you're doing, right? And so that's why a lot of us kind of like dip our toe in, right? The first few businesses that I started, I was working full time for somebody else. I was doing that work, but I was like, okay, weekends, nights, on the side, oh, gotta take leave, right? Go do my passion project things. There's a psychological, the loneliness can get real, like really real. I see some big eyes and nodding. And then the time commitment, I think that one of the biggest things that we see working on the non-sexy end of the business is folks who don't want to put as much time into that end of it, understandably, because you want to chase the real reason why you're in business, right? And so what ends up happening, some of that back end stuff starts dragging folks down, right? And so my hope is if I can make that less scary, if I can make that sexier, then we can dedicate some time. And what I usually tell people is pick one day a week that you work on your business, not in your business, okay? So even if you're pre-formation, but you still think that you want to go towards that, just pick a day a week, cut it out, and you're like slodging through, is that a word? Yeah. You're going through all of the, fiscal forms, you're going through the incorporation forms for the state, maybe you're going through setting up your chart of accounts, whatever that means, in your accounting software, right? You're doing the stuff that's not as fun, maybe, it's not working on your product, but it's gonna make sure that your product has somewhere to live, somewhere to thrive. You're building the hale. So why do we do it then? Why is everybody here? All the exciting stuff, right? Because we
love it.
We love it, yeah. We love the work we're doing. Trying to put that work out to community. Other reasons, yeah.
I just became a mom.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and life change.
Yeah.
But I want to leave a legacy for my daughter. I want to do something that empowers not just me, but her in the future, that she can say, this is what my mom did.
Yeah.
My husband already has 2 businesses, and
Okay.
anyway, I want to do something for her.
Good.
Yeah.
So you have a good support system, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then all the reasons that folks said in the beginning, right? Empowering communities, being a voice, building community. All of those are the things that we want. Anybody just want some independence?
Yes.
Make your own hours, do your own projects, right? There's a lot of that's often a big driver for a lot of the folks that we work with. So what I want you to do is pull out the PowerPoint. You should have some notes, or just if you have a booklet you're taking notes in. And what I want to think about a little bit is entrepreneurship. People talk all the time that you can be entrepreneurial in any spaces, right? And that's true. You don't have to have your own business to be entrepreneurial, right? And you can bring sort of a mentality and approach. But every business, every project, every idea starts with some seedling, right? There's some cool thing that's like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. Yeah. When? You're not bothering. You need copy? Oh yeah. She can help you out. Thank you. It all starts with an idea, right? And I know it already popped into your minds as I said it. So I want you to write down, what's your idea? What's that? What is it? I'll be right back. Kikor, Angela. So from every idea lives somewhere, right? There's some space that it exists in. Like none of us live in a vacuum, right? So maybe our idea comes to us at 2 o'clock in the morning, but we want to see where would that idea live. And so I want you to think next about who are the people that you would potentially look at partnering with? What are the communities that you would want to sort of flesh your idea out with, get some feedback from? Who are the partners? And there's always this when we know we have that amazing idea, there's that moment, right? Like, oh, do I talk to somebody about this, or am I giving them my idea, right? Am I giving them my competitor, my gold mine? So it's important for us to know who our trust circle is, right? But I would encourage folks to think about the risk of not collaborating if you put all this work and all this energy and all these time and financial resources into putting something out that doesn't resonate. It doesn't land. It doesn't have the impact that you want it to have. So there has to be a point at which you're willing to talk to other people about it. You're willing to get input and ideas, get some of a sounding board going. So write that down for yourself. And then the next stage of our idea is, okay, let's start developing it. So who is it? Who's doing it? Is it you, or is it something that you want to partner with somebody else to do, or you want to hire other people to do? right? What's your role in it? Who's doing it? What are the timelines that you're wanting to do? Is it something that is really time sensitive? You need to get it out? Or is this gonna be a passion project that's gonna live for years and years and years? What does it need to be successful? So what are the pieces of it that are missing? You start fleshing that idea out. And identifying those pukas will help lead you to identify, okay, so what do I need to somehow find? What are my gaps? Do I need someone who has writing skills? Because I have a great vision, but I need somebody who can help me put it down on paper. Do I have, and that can help me sort of tell the story, right, from a narrative perspective. Do I need the financial skill set? Do I need somebody who can come in and help me? Wow, I'm gonna go to apply for this funding, but they're asking me for a budget and I have no idea where to start with that. So do I need somebody who maybe does have an idea about where to start for that? Right, so what are the pieces that I'm missing? And that takes us to our goal of, okay, I have something ready. I have something ready that it's at a stage that I can start pulling in the support, pulling in these resources, pulling in what we need to help really kick some energy in and make this project come to life. And at that stage is when I ask people the question, do you have a project or do you have a business? Many people jump straight to, I have this great idea, I want to start a business, right? But sometimes we have products that fit great in other people's businesses. Sometimes we have ideas that we really don't want to do the back end, or we really don't want to do some piece of it, and we can partner up, we can find another place for it to live. And then it's about defining, well, what piece of it do I want to maintain? How do I partner and engage in that way? I think that sometimes what we see is we see folks starting businesses based off of projects, and then the business piece just eats and eats and eats the time and the energy and the resource. And so we encourage those clients to say, okay, who can we find that's maybe a better ʻŌlelo for you to go live within and partner with? If you have a project, it tends to be sort of one idea or circulating around one idea. So maybe it's like a film and a manuscript and an app, but it's kind of all around this like PIC idea, right? And maybe that's enough for you to say, okay, this needs to be a business that lives on its own. There's definitely single purpose projects, single purpose entities out there that are created specifically for one project, right? But oftentimes projects live within a business that has multiple projects that it's working on, right? So project tends to be single, limited purpose, has an end or completion. It's like, okay, this was the concept, we worked on the concept, we delivered it, and now it's PO. Now we're going to the next project, right? And again, we just sort of continue to say, okay, if it's a project, is there a partnership opportunity? Under a small business framework, again, it tends to be there's multiple ideas or there's multiple projects. Or even if today it's one project, you say, you know what, I know though that I'm gonna do other projects that are along the same ilk. So it really makes sense for me now to create the business structure so that I can continue to, I have it in place so that when we have new project ideas that come online, we already have the back end to support it. It tends to have more legal, financial, creative ownership. You can still, though, I would say, build legal, financial, and creative ownership into a relationship you have with someone else. Right? You can still bring a concept idea to somebody that you want to partner with and say, let's do a joint venture. Let's do this together. These are the pieces of it that I want. These are the pieces of it that I would love if you would come to the table with. Can we collaborate that way? And the small business side takes a lot of investment on the administrative side. And to be honest, it's less the legal stuff. We're going to talk about that next. And it's really more the stuff that each small business owner needs to do so that you're paying your bills on time, you know whether or not you're profitable, you know how to price your product. It's really more about understanding for yourself, for your team, how to run your business in a way that doesn't drive you nuts. and that's successful. It doesn't suck all your mana that you really need to be feeding into your projects, right? And into your passions. So far, so good? Yeah, please.
So if you say to build the skeleton of your administrative structure first before going in your project is more akamai, or does it matter?
I would say if you have an idea and you're not sure whether it's a project or whether it's a business, I would flesh out the idea first and decide, is creating my own space the next step? Or are there partnership opportunities or other ways that it makes that this idea is actually going to get further and I'm actually going to be happier and get to spend more time on it if I'm working with somebody else on it? So I would say flesh it out first. Once you get to a point though that you've made that decision, okay, I do want to start a business, then I would create the skeleton. Does that help?
So when you say infrastructure to house multiple projects, you're not talking about an actual
Physical space? No.
Because it could be online.
Absolutely, yeah. I just mean the accounts, the legal, that you have a GE license, the things that require you to be able to be in business legally. I mean, plenty of people in business, but we all want to be legal, right? Okay, so let's say we're at the point that, okay, we flesh out our idea, we know that we want to create our own business. That's the most appropriate next step. That's what we're going to spend the majority of the time during this session and next session talking about, okay? We're on that train. We're on the starting my own business, I got this, no worries, Rebecca, okay, we're going. So these are the main things we're going to cover. Types of business entities. Okay, we'll go through the different types of forms. I think we talked earlier about LLCs, some 501c3s, some subordinate infrastructure, any other, well, we'll get to it in a second. Getting an EIN, employer identification number, registering with the state, talk a little bit about business insurance, and then lastly, funding the startup phase of the business. Yes, please.
You mentioned about partnerships when you were talking about projects and business. If we feel that our project maybe would be better with a partner, do we still get a business license, or do we try to get under their business?
So either way, it depends a little bit on how you want to structure it. So if you decide, okay, I want to go down the partnership route, and if you know that you don't want to take care of the back end stuff, then I would suggest figuring out a way that you can build a contract. Basically use a contract as the basis of the relationship to say, okay, we're going to go in on this venture together, but have that business use their back end to own it. But have a contract that shows your ownership. You could also create the project itself as a business. So the project itself you could incorporate as a limited liability or limited partnership joint venture. You register it with the state of Hawaii, just like we're going to go through it in a second, but that becomes something you co-own. So maybe they own 50% or 49% and you own 51%, and you have a management agreement that says, and it doesn't have to be fancy, it can just be a piece of paper that says, this is what you folks are going to take care of the back end, you folks are going to be a fiscal sponsor for us, et cetera, et cetera. Folks are going to worry about payroll, folks are going to do that piece of it. And on this side, I'm going to worry about this creative, I'll run these things by you, we'll partner on this part, that type of thing. Okay? Yeah, do you mind passing this back? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about different types of entities. So once we know that, okay, we're starting a business, the very first question on the federal form is, what type of business are you starting? So it's hard to get far until you answer this question.
One of these questions is,
Oh, yeah.
when you start the mission statement, like when do you produce the mission statement for your business?
I would say at any point in the process. So the question was, when do you start your mission statement? So mission statement isn't a legally required thing, but a mission statement is a great thing to decide for your business and the people who are working with you, what is the purpose of why you're being created. And so you really ask that every step along the way, right? We're asking that in idea formation, we're asking that when we actually turn in paperwork, we're asking that though constantly, right? I mean, every enterprise that certainly I've been a part of, every year or so we're asking the question, thank you. Why are we here? What are we doing? Are we serving our mission? You had another question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Uh-huh.
Is there ever trust-related business, or is that funding only?
Say that one more time.
Is there ever trust-related business, or is that funding only?
You mean so maybe ask the person to clarify if they mean if it's like a personal trust, if that's the question.
Yeah, I think I'll check.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So any entity can form a business. A person can form a business can form a business. Usually you have live bodies that are included in that. So yes, you can a trust can form a business, but they're going to go through the same process that a person would form a business. So important important caveat that I have to be sure to provide. I do not provide, I'm not, Leanne said I'm a lawyer, but I don't do contract, I don't do incorporation law. And so all of this is just from like years and years of working with thousands of small businesses in Hawaii. None of this is legal advice. I'll try to flag where along the way folks would normally seek out legal advice. And I'd be happy to give some ideas for, we have wonderful corporation lawyers in town that folks could hire. Yeah? Yep. Okay, so sole proprietor. Is anybody already a sole proprietor? Few folks? Okay. So sole proprietor is oftentimes the first step for a lot of folks in forming a business. Basically, it literally is saying, I as a person am going to be engaging in this type of business. So it allows folks to legally practice in the state of Hawaii, legally do work, get revenue in the state of Hawaii, pay taxes on that revenue, but it's all treated through the person. So it's treated through you. So this is something that a lot of folks will do if you don't need employees, if it's really you and another sole proprietor who's doing their thing, and you're not really worried about liability. And there's still ways for sole proprietors to protect their own personal liability, but usually this is a structure that doesn't have a whole lot of protections. You're essentially saying that I, as a person, am also the business. Okay, so you're one and the same. Taxes are done together, legally you're treated as one entity. Okay, partnerships are basically sole proprietorships with more than one person. Limited liability company. There are a bunch of questions about this. So essentially, does everyone have the handout that I passed out? Okay, so there's some, you have enough? Okay, there's various sort of good tips about kind of some of the things to think about. We just adopted this from a legal education institution, but there's a cool chart. So if you flip ahead to the third page, there's a cool chart that talks about the differences between the different kinds of entities and the main advantages and the main drawbacks. So I would say most of the small businesses that we work with are LLCs, are limited liability corporations. And essentially what it does is it creates a separate business entity that's separate from yourself personally. You have ownership in that LLC. You could have one owner, you could have multiple owners. There's an ownership in the LLC, but there's still a separate legal entity than yourself personally. Also what happens is that there's immediately a separation of liability. So if the business, for example, worst case scenario, defaults, goes into bankruptcy, has financial problems, that the creditors to the business can go after the business assets, but then once that's been exhausted, they can't come after personal assets. So it creates a buffer between the two. There's ways to pierce it. There's always caveats to everything. For example, if you personally acted negligently, right? If you did something really terrible, if you defrauded the company. I mean, there's still ways to sort of pierce that separation, but on the whole, create separation from all kinds of liability. Financial liability, product liability, contract liability, etc. So this LLC, this business entity now is separate from yourself personally. Okay, make sense? It's relatively easy to set up an LLC in Hawaii, and I'll go through that in a second. But that is, again, many small businesses in Hawaii are LLCs. And then the way that they're taxed, they can be taxed in different ways. It gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So this is where I would ping someone and say, either consult a CPA or whomever you do your taxes with, or a lawyer to talk about how for your personal situation, the way that the LLC pays the taxes. But usually the two options are either an LLC pays taxes as a corporation or an LLC pays taxes as an individual. Okay, so that just when it comes to the tax part. And I would say a lot of the businesses that we work with end up paying the taxes as an individual because it's just easier, yeah. You can fold it into your, when you do your annual taxes. Okay. There's different types of corporations. Corporations essentially are slightly separated from LLCs in that they have shareholders. Again, they're completely separate legal entities. They're taxed at different rates. The primary difference for small businesses between the C Corp and an S Corp are that S Corps, you can pay yourself a salary. So you can be an employee of your own company. You're not just paying yourself with dividends or with owner draws. So for example, our company, we started off as an LLC, and in 2007, and maybe around 2012, we transitioned into an S Corp, just because at the time, all of our owners were working full-time for the business, and we wanted to have like a normal paycheck. And so we were at a place that we had grown to where we could give ourselves a normal paycheck, and so we still had to pay on any profits at the end of the year, but the S Corporation transition allowed us to be able to pay ourselves salary along the way as a normal expense of the business. Yeah, you had a question?
I worked for a company that was, LLC, but they said they filed as an S Corp. Have you heard of that?
Yes. And I'm not familiar enough to be able, but yes, it's, so most LLC, so there's no, the IRS does not recognize LLCs. So they exist, but in terms of paying the taxes, they don't have a form for LLCs. So you have to pay it either as a partnership or so either as your personal or as a corporation. And then in that case, it sounds like they did it as an S corporation. Yeah. Okay? Yeah.
So then after that, starting a LLC, you wouldn't recommend going as an S Corp unless there's a lot of funding already there.
I wouldn't say a lot, but unless you're at a place where it's important for the owners to be able to take regular salary. Yeah. And then you're subject to payroll taxes and paying all that on time and whatnot. Yeah. You can jump straight to an S Corp, but it just kind of depends. So if the business right away is going to have employees, including the owners, then I would say an S Corp would be fine. Again, not legal advice, consult your attorney. Nonprofits, I would just say that's just from my experience in the businesses we work with. And then lastly, nonprofits. So there's a lot of different kinds of nonprofits actually. And when we say nonprofit, I actually really hate the term nonprofit. I think I'm gonna stop using it. So it's really that the entity is tax exempt. It's really a tax exempt entity. And they're actually corporations. Nonprofits are actually considered corporations, but they're tax exempt. So they don't pay income tax on the profit. But who here has worked for a nonprofit? A bunch. Still gotta make profit, right? Or else how does it pay for this beautiful building, for employees, for the work that's being done, right? So legally, the difference between taxable and non-taxable entities is that after, okay, we get revenue into the business. Let's say our business made $100,000 that year, 2018. Okay, we have expenses. Let's say it's $90,000, including paying yourself. Okay, pay yourself in the expenses. No, I'm serious. Like I'm gonna hit on this a lot today. Okay, and then doing real simple, you have your net income at the end or your net loss, right? So if this number is positive, net income, if this number is negative, it's still called net income, but it's usually referred to as net loss, okay? And so what's our net income this year? 10,000, okay? So in any of the for-profit structures, so any of the structures that are not taxed, that are taxable entities, this 10,000 becomes profit. That is the responsibility of the owner. So the owner can either take it out of the business, the owner can leave it in the business. You know, what you physically do with the 10,000 is up to the business owners, but that becomes the responsibility of the owners through an LLC structure to pay taxes on. Through a C corporation, the corporation itself pays taxes on that net income. But this becomes an important number in the taxing world, okay? And in the entities that are subject to taxation, this amount can come out and can be paid to the owners. In a nonprofit, but still we're making profit. So in a non-taxable entity structure, this 10,000 does not get paid out to owners, doesn't get paid out to the ED, the executive director, it doesn't get paid out to the board of directors. This net income goes back in to 2019. Ooh, calamai. 2019 as retained earnings, which just means it stays in the business, right? It can be used to pay expenses for the next year, right? But it doesn't get taken out as earnings. So there are lots of different kinds of non-taxable entity structures. And then it gets very complicated about what kind of income can be taxed and what kind of income can't be taxed. But we have state only recognized and then we have federal recognized. So in order to be in the state of Hawaii, so basically nonprofits can be recognized just within the state level and then unincorporated at the federal level. So basically like they don't know you exist. You're just operating at a state level. That means that you're still subject to pay federal taxes, but not subject to pay state income taxes, okay? It's easier to get this status, but it's not impossible to get federal status either. Now under 501c, there's lots of different, 3 is just one. 501c, by the way, is just like where it appears in the tax code. That's all the number means. And then 3, there's actually, I think like 30 different kinds of 501c's for all kinds of different things and for all kinds of different, we have, for example, like sports clubs, trade associations like chambers of commerce or small business associations, those kinds of things. Political organizations, things like that. So the 3 is the one though that we commonly talk about as being charitable organizations, right, that are not subject to federal or state tax, okay? Okay. Some of the things to think about in choosing your entity, and this handout has more stuff. Hi Paula, Paula's here. Hi. Do you want to hang out with folks outside and then I'll call you? Okay, thanks. Okay, so some of the things to think about, definitely thinking about what you want your tax, how do you want to be able to pay your taxes? Is it something that you want to do on your person? Is it something that you want the business to worry about their taxes separately and kind of treat you more as if you're like an employee or just like a separated owner? Thinking about things like, are you worried about personal liability? We work with, for example, a lot of food businesses, and we're like, yes, be an LLC, or be a structure that gives you some personal liability separation, because there's a lot of liability related stuff in that industry. But other industries don't have the same level of risk. So that becomes a business decision for you to make to determine your level of your risk. Things like understanding what the different paperwork, someone earlier talked about making sure we do the paperwork right. So thinking about the different levels of paperwork burden. I will say though that both the state and the federal government, in my opinion, have gotten better about making the paperwork burden easier for LLCs and for nonprofits over the years. So it's actually a lot faster, for example, to get 501c3 status. It used to be like 18 months, was normal. Now, if you're a nonprofit that's generating under $50,000 a year in revenue, you can get it in like a couple weeks. So they've made it a lot easier. Even the costs have gone down. While everything else is going up in the state of Hawaii, the cost of filing your business has actually gone down over the last decade. So anyhow, just some things to think about. Do not begin operating your business before your legal entity. So don't start collecting revenue on things before you have your business license. I mean, mainly it's illegal, but also it gets complicated with your revenue, and it gets real complicated. I would say most small businesses that we work with, when they come to us, they've already started. They may or may not have been formed, but they've definitely been doing business, and there's definitely a real lack of clarity, we'll just call it, between whether that's their money or their business's money in that bank account. And so sort of untwining that becomes something that, oftentimes they're coming to us because it's like there's a little bit of a crisis and they need some help kind of untwining things. So I would say learn from our amazing clients who I love dearly, learn from their experiences and do your best. You know now that you want to start something, so start it before you start bringing in revenue, and then you have to unwind and go, oh my gosh, what do I owe for this? What about this? But I put in money, I paid for that. How do I treat that? Did I just make a donation to the, let's just, if we're at square one, then let's set it up from where we are. Okay, ask your attorney if things don't make sense. It's important to know that registering to do business is done at a state level. So if you want to be able to do business in California or in New York or in other states or even other countries, that it's important to make sure that you've checked their local state laws and registered to do business there. And that goes two ways. So everyone who generates revenue here in Hawaii should be registered with the DCCA, should have a GE tax license, and should be paying general excise on their revenue that they generate here. That's definitely an area that we see a lot of. For us as local small business advocates, I get real frustrated because we definitely see a lot of businesses coming in and doing business in Hawaii, not being legally registered and not paying local taxes. So if you have questions about, oh, are they doing that the right way? Or how do they underbid us? They didn't include the 4.5% GT. Yeah, they probably are not doing something right, and you should probably let DCCA or DOTAX or Department of Taxation know. Yeah.
Question about that. Dear friend and myself are thinking about starting a 501c3 with a location here in Honolulu and one in Oakland.
Okay.
How does that work if we wanted to have one nonprofit but in two places?
So the good thing is that since you talked about wanting to be a 501c3, that's a federal non-taxable status. So that would apply anywhere within the jurisdiction of the United States, or what they think their jurisdiction is. So making sure to have the 501c3 status first, and then file with both the state of California and the state of Hawaii using the 501c3 status is what I would suggest. I don't know anything about California tax incorporation, so you've got to check with the state of California. But I'll show you folks in a minute. There's some great resources here in Hawaii for offices that are meant to be a resource to help people go through this. And I'm sure California has some of their centralized resources as well. Oh, there's a question. I love all these mystery questions. Okay, do I need a separate GET number? I have one as a realtor and I want to create a separate business. Okay, so you don't need one, but I would say you should probably have one. They're not that expensive to get, but also just take a step back and think about it as, is what I'm doing really a separate effort? Is it a separate business? In which case it should probably have its own separate GE license. But if they're all sole proprietor, if you're a sole proprietor and you have a GE license as a sole proprietor, then you can generate revenue for all kinds of different lines of business. So the question is, do I need to get one? No. Does Rebecca think I should get one? Yes. Go ahead.
What about an EIN?
Yeah.
Like every time, do you get a new one every time you do a different LLC?
Yeah.
So like if you, like film projects, if we made it each film project an LLC, we'd also do the EIN as well.
I would, you can, but you don't have to. Okay. So we'll get into, let me answer that in a second when we get into EINs.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Still with EIN, I just wanted to ask, is that you only need an EIN if you have employees? Because I'm like a single member LLC.
Yep.
And I think I didn't get an EIN.
Yeah, you're good, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Okay. So, and then lastly, just don't panic, because it's okay. And everybody does things in the beginning in ways that need to be fixed later. Everything's amendable. Okay, question. Can a DCCA registered nonprofit entity carry on legally until funded? As long as, yes, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to this in a second, whoever wrote that question. Okay, so let's talk about getting an EIN. Okay, so an EIN is an employer identification number. It's issued by the IRS, and it is only required to Lono, yeah? To Lono's point, it's only required for entities that have employees. So most small businesses do not need an EIN, in the beginning at least, right? Because you don't yet have employees. However, Rebecca recommends you get one anyway, and you can go back and get one. They're free, first of all. They issue on the spot, second of all. But the real reason why I think they're important to get is because essentially how I think about it is the EIN is a social security number for your business. So if you don't have an EIN, you'll see the forms that say, please enter your TIN or EIN. They mean different things, but they're generally think of them the same. Taxpayer identification number or employer identification number, it's just the federal lingo. But the forms will normally say, please enter here your employer identification number, your taxpayer identification number, or your social security number. So what does that mean? If you don't have one, what are you putting on all these public forms? Your social security number, right? Which many, many, many people do. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. It's okay. But I do personally prefer, and I think that most folks that we work with prefer to not have to use your personal social security number if you don't have to. Okay? Especially because a lot of these documents are publicly accessible documents, yeah. So again, if you don't have one yet, it's okay. If you already started and you don't have one, you can just log on and go get one. It's fine, you can do it retroactively. But it's something that I would just suggest that folks always get for a new business entity. Now to the question of whether you need separate ones for each subsidiary. So does the parent company have employees?
I guess so. Like, I usually set it up to where I'm an employee. Is that a good idea, by the way? Like,
It can be.
Instead of being like
It depends a lot on different questions, yeah.
It's what?
It depends on different questions.
I see.
But it can be. It's
So then it would have employees
because you're set up as an employee, yeah. So I would say that this is probably a more detailed question that you should double check with IRS on.
Okay.
Generally think about it as one, if an entity has an employee, then that entity needs an EIN.
Okay.
If it does not have any employees, then it's optional if you want a separate EIN or not. And it's just kind of a matter of like how separated do you want the businesses. For example, I have some businesses that we work with that are multi-million-dollar businesses that have like 10 different trade names. You wouldn't even know sometimes that those different business lines are under the same parent company. They have one EIN, they have one payroll, all their employees are employees of their company because they don't want to worry about having to do separate filings for all their businesses. So they just have a bunch of trade names that they can do. Trade name is not a separate legal entity. Trade name is just our business is going to go by a whole bunch of stuff. Right, a whole bunch of different names depending on what we're doing, right? So that's one. I definitely have clients who do it that way very successfully, and they enjoy it that way. I have other people who are a couple $100,000. They're smaller businesses, but yet they really want to have totally separate separation between the business lines. Like for example, the example that someone shared earlier, the realtor business and the film business maybe have no correlation. Maybe even the film business has a separate partner in there that owns a portion of it. You maybe want to treat it as a totally separate business and get a separate EIN. Okay. Yeah.
So often in the film industry, there's contract for hire.
Uh-huh.
So would you have the EIN for contract for hires? Or would they be considered employees or not then because they're...
So are you asking from the standpoint of the business that's hiring the contractor, or are you asking from the perspective of the contractor that's being hired?
From the business hiring
a contractor.
For hire for, let's say, a gaffer.
Okay. What's a gaffer? Sorry.
Or, well, and
Lighting? Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm a groupie of all of you, but I'm not a media maker myself. So in that instance, it sounds to me, and this is probably, you know, this is not legal advice, but what it sounds to me is that that's a normal expense of the business to hire out. So that person's not an employee. That person's, you're treating them as an independent contractor. You're not paying payroll taxes on them. You're not checking their legality to work in the country. So in that case, that would just be like out of your expenses and not, yeah. So I would say you don't need to have an EIN. And again, the EIN is only for the business. So each business only has one. You could have 1,000 independent contractors, and you'll only have one EIN. You could have 1,000 employees, and the business itself only has one EIN. Yeah, but you don't need one if you only have independent contractors. I still think folks should get one though. It's still, that way you're not having to use your own social security number. And also just the use of independent contractors I know is very prevalent in the film industry. And I would just say make sure you're checking that the structure is appropriate as an independent contractor and not as an employee, because that gets real dicey real fast. Okay, getting an EIN. So go to irs.gov. Here's the full link, but even if you just go to irs.gov and then search for EIN in the search toolbar, it'll take you to the form. There's also a paper form, but online's relatively easy. So this is what'll come up. I'll provide you a bunch of information. They have this cute little EIN assistant. It's like their wizard tool. And you can just scroll to the bottom and begin application. Yeah.
You have to reapply to get the EIN number, or that once that number is established, that sticks with your business until you decide to close it?
Once you're the latter. So once you get an EIN, that's the business's EIN. You can apply to change. So if you change your status, your business incorporation status, so say you go from being an LLC to a nonprofit, then they may assign you a new EIN. Because how the EINs look is they're like 20-6 numbers. The first 20 or 04 indicates the type of entity it is. So they may assign you a new one, but let them worry about that. It's yours forever, okay? Okay, and then the very first question they ask, what type of business are you? Okay, so again, wanting to try to at least make an initial decision. I'm gonna start as this. We may change later, but we're gonna start at least for the foreseeable future as a sole proprietor or an LLC or a 501c3. This is what the paper form looks like. Okay, one of the questions that they ask is is your NAICS code? Has anyone ever heard of NAICS codes? Familiar with NAICS codes? Okay, so it's just the classifications. It's like the Dewey Decimal System, but for businesses. Does everyone remember what the Dewey Decimal System is? Did I lose anyone there? Okay. So basically, it's just a coding to be able to say this number is associated with this industry. Okay, and so you can go online because it'll ask you like, what's your NAICS code? And you're like, I don't know what that is. What's a NAICS code? So you just go to their NAICS. It's managed by Census. They just have, and you can just search keywords. So the two that I put here are film studio and independent journalists. So I just searched those terms, and these are the associated NAICS codes. Very rarely do you have one that's perfectly like on point. That's me. Sometimes you're just finding the closest industry. Okay. Other things you want to be sure that you know, so that you can do your initial business filings. Oh, yeah, one sec, is what's your business name? And I've seen people get hung up for months on this question. Just pick a name, you can amend it later. I mean, it's better if you know it up front, but if you know that like, I'm starting to get revenue, I need to form, go ahead and just pick a name and you can amend it later. It's a little bit of a pain, so try to have your name up front, but you can always amend it. You wanna know your address, your business address, and you want to know what are the other toughies that people get stuck on. Those are the main ones. And then yeah, the address, believe it or not, people have like crises about it. Should I use my home? Can I use a P.O. box? Should I go out and get a P.O. box? Yeah, it's.
What do you think about
does become a crisis. I think, I mean, it's kind of like the social. If you don't have to use it, don't. But I think it's fine. If that's where you're operating out of, not a big deal. Most people don't know one way or another, whether that's your home or some business address. And was that the question you had earlier, or did you have another one? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if that code can ever change for, or would you recommend just doing a DBA? Like, for example, if it starts off as marketing,
Yeah.
and then I want to go into something, a food business, would you recommend changing it or just doing a trademark?
Oh, so mostly, I think that they mostly just use this for like their internal data system and then to kind of identify who you are. It's not meant to box you in to that industry. Even when you start up, you can do 20 different industries, but you just put one in so that they know like what's your main industry. But it can absolutely change over time. That's no problem.
Do you have to be part of Dun & Bradstreet or anything like that?
No. Being a part of Dun & Bradstreet is good for businesses that are, that you're going to go after a loan. Because some lenders, especially if you're looking for a large amount of money, will check you on Dun & Bradstreet. But you certainly don't have to. From a lender perspective, when in the loan funds that we help manage, we almost never pull Dun & Bradstreet reports. Dun & Bradstreet for those, you're talking about Dunn's number, not the Dun & Bradstreet business. Okay, so there's different things that Dun & Bradstreet helps manage. There's sort of business profiles that help to look up, is this business credible? Do they pay their bills on time? Do they get accounts? That kind of thing. Those things, I mean, don't sue me, Dun & Bradstreet, but I don't have a lot of clients that use it. I'll just say it that way. And I don't have a lot of loan funds that actually access those accounts. I do think for the larger lenders that they absolutely do. So if you're applying for like a $5 million loan, I think that those lenders and those type of businesses, they will look and see what's your credit worthiness, what's your credit history, that type of thing. If you're doing business with the federal government, then you will have to get what's called a DUNS number. So if you're going to get contracts with the federal government, there's a whole other process registering in there what's called SAMS, SAMS.gov, and that does require you to get a DUNS number, which I believe is free as well. But it's a third-party entity that assigns a DUNS number to your small business. And if anyone here or watching has questions about how to go through that process, we'd be happy to send some resources your way. Okay. Registering to do business in the state of Hawaii. So the only thing really that is legally required in order to do business in the state of Hawaii is having a GE license. Okay, so the form is called the BB1, and it can be accessed online, or we'll walk in a moment into a different system that they have a wizard thing that we usually recommend folks do. But basically, filing a BB1 asks all the same questions or very similar questions to what the EIN asks. So it needs to know your business name, and then it'll ask for your EIN or social security number, your address, what type of industry are you in, that type of thing. Okay? For most industries, it's a $20 filing fee. For some, it's not. For things like manufacturing, businesses, liquor sales, tobacco sales, there's different fees. But for most small businesses, it's a $20 filing fee. Okay? And then for planning purposes, GE is for any revenue on Oahu, it's basically you're paying 0.45, so 0.045, so 4.5% of your sales, all revenue. Okay, so GE is not just assessed on profit. A lot of people come to me and are like, "Oh, we haven't bought our GE yet because we never made profit. We made money, but we spent everything." Okay, but GE is on all revenue. Okay, just think about it like when you go to the grocery store, you're paying GE, right, on that wholesale. That supermarket is in turn paying all that GE to the Department of Taxation. Okay, so what you pay is 0.45, sorry. What you can charge though, anybody know offhand? The amount is on your receipt? 4.712, yeah. So, and it's because you can pay that, you charge that additional amount because you're actually paying 0.045 or 4.5% on the GE that you collect. So that's why you can charge a little bit more to cover the GE that you collect. Okay? So how often you have to pay it depends on how much revenue you make in the year. So if you're gonna have to, gosh, I think it's 4,000. If it's 4,000 or more, then it's monthly that you're gonna have to pay. So your revenue being around 100,000. If you're gonna be paying between 2,000 and 4,000 a year, then it's quarterly. And if you're gonna be paying under 2,000 a year, then it's semi-annually. Okay, so it's always due the 20th day after the end of the month. So for example, if you're paying semi-annually, then you're paying on July 20th for the period that runs January to June. And then you're paying on January 20th for the period that runs from July 1 to December 31, the second half of the year, basically. It's due 20 days later. Does that make sense? Okay. Then quarterly and then monthly. Usually they'll tell you, so if you start, a lot of folks will start off paying semi-annually, and then when your GE starts increasing, they'll send you a notice and say you need to start filing quarterly, or you need to start filing monthly. Still your responsibility as a taxpayer to know and to file it and pay it appropriately, but they also monitor it and will usually let you know. I usually tell folks they'll pay it monthly, honestly. It's not that difficult to go online. There's an online system that we'll walk through in a second. It's not that hard to do it, and I just personally feel, in our experience working with small businesses, it is real easy to start spending the GE that you collect. And then all of a sudden, July 19th comes around, and people are like, OMG, my taxes are due tomorrow. I didn't save all that GE that we collected from January to June. I'm gonna have this huge tax bill that I gotta pay. So I usually tell people just pay it along the way, or put it in a separate account, right? So your business, you can have multiple checking or savings accounts with your bank. Just transfer it right away. As soon as you get paid from your client, take the 4.5% and move it right over into that business account, into that GE account, so that when it comes time to pay it, it's available, you don't have to stress about it, okay? And then of course on neighbor islands, I think it's still 4%, although Maui, I think, well, I don't know which counties, but a couple counties might increase it to 4.5 as well, okay? So other things that you need to do if you're filing for something other than, say, a sole proprietorship. So DCCA is a good place to go and look to make sure your name that you want has not been used by somebody else. So you can do all the filings, but then they'll tell you if your name was either too close to somebody's name already, or is exactly the same as someone's name already. So I actually think it's kind of fun. Like sometimes you guys are gonna think I'm ridiculous, but sometimes when I hang out with my friends and we're just like, oh, let's create these random businesses, and we look up, is this one taken? Is this one taken? I told you guys, I'm like a junkie. So you can just look up through DCCA business name search, you know, what different, if the name is already taken or if it's like super similar to the name that you want, they might kick it back, okay? And then Hawaii Business Express is where, I think we're walking you through in a second how to register there. That's where we recommend that folks register. Articles of organization have to be filed if you're forming an LLC. Costs $50. It used to be $100, so this is one that's actually come down. And I have some samples if people want to take a look at them, but the form is very simple. And in fact, the Department of Taxation provides a sample article that you can just fill out as well. The big thing I would say though about if you are doing a multi-member LLC, meaning it's more than just yourself, is you don't have to designate what your ownership percentages are, but I suggest you do. So a lot of times people will just put 2 members, they just assume it's 50-50, but then, because you guys are like BFFs, and then like in 5 years you guys are not BFFs, and it gets real messy. So I would just say put it in your incorporation docs, what's the split, so that you don't have to go fighting about it. Like, well, I put in more, well no, I did more, da-da-da-da-da. Like, bruh, it's right here, this is what we said. This is what we agreed to, okay? We gotta amend it, we'll amend it, but this is what we agreed to, okay? So, by the way, I also would do that even if it's your spouse or your brother or your sister or your parent. I know everybody loves everybody, but you know, things sometimes get messy and you don't want that extra complication. So my suggestion is just put it right in the document at the upfront. Okay, you're 40, I'm 60, you're 50, I'm 50, whatever it is. And then again, you can always amend it at any time. And then your articles of incorporation and bylaws if you're registering a nonprofit. I think this used to be 50, so also came down. But so for the state of Hawaii, there's articles of incorporation that have to be filed. I have a sample of those as well if anybody wants to see them. Same thing though, there's some normal terms that are typically in there, but what both of these documents really are is just, here's how we're structuring our business. Here's who owns what. Here's what we're gonna do if things go bad and we gotta close, or if we've fulfilled our project and we're gonna close, you know, et cetera. Yeah.
For the nonprofit, before the bylaws are created, we need to have a board, right?
Correct. Minimum of 3 members. Okay, for a nonprofit in the state of Hawaii, it's primarily, as I mentioned, filing your articles and your bylaws. And then for federal, there's a lot of different 501Cs. And so you can go online to see all of them if you are not sure if 3 is the correct designation that you're thinking about. But if you're confident that it's 3, then the form for creating a 501c3 is called the F1023. And in the federal world, F just means form. So if you see F in the beginning, it means form, and I means instructions. So if you see, F1023 is the form 1023. And if you are not sure how to fill it out, then you look up what? I1023. Perfect. And they'll usually do line by line instructions for what you put in there. The filing fee is $600, or in 2014, IRS created a form called F1023EZ. Do we know what EZ means from our personal taxes? It's just easy. Yeah.
What is the 501c4?
Oh, okay, we'll get into that in just a sec. The EZ form is for entities that have not generated more than $50,000 a year in total revenue over the last 3 years, and then you don't plan to do more than $50,000 a year. Okay? If you think you're going to do more than $50,000 in the next each year, so $50,000 per year in the next couple years, or if you already did $50,000 per year because you were not 501 yet, you were just state, then you'll have to do the regular form. It's a little bit longer, requires you to do some attachments, and the filing fee is a little bit more. Okay? Yeah.
You file for like a sole proprietor, LLC, or one of the other ones, you basically get it accepted, but I think this one can get rejected by the government, right? If they don't think that you're...
Correct.
So
I think the state can reject it too, to be frank. I just don't think that that's typical.
So you lose the 600 or
The filing fee? Mm-hmm. But it's kind of a negotiation. Oftentimes they're asking you for more information. They'll send you information and say, we don't think that you qualify based upon the information you've provided. If you have more information you want to provide, you can send it in.
Are the main
But yes, you lose the filing fee.
reasons for like a religious organization or a educational one?
Mm-hmm. Or charitable, so social services, human services, education.
Mm-hmm.
You may have already said
Because
education.
I've heard Polynesian Cultural Center, I know it is nonprofit,
Okay.
like Polynesian Cultural Center.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too specific a question, but like, why are they considered? Is it because they're connected to?
I don't know. I mean, I've never looked at their forming documents, but I mean, we know that they have a religious connection, right? So they also are educational and cultural, certainly. I mean, they're providing education, right? I don't know. I'd have to read their documents to speak more specifically to them. But any entity that feels as if the primary work that they're doing is educational, charitable, cultural based can potentially qualify to be a 501c3. And it's just about putting forward the argument why. It doesn't prevent, 501c3s can make money. So is that where the kind of concern is, or the question you're asking?
Yeah, like sometimes I think nonprofits are limited, and that sometimes maybe even though you have to pay tax, there's like a ceiling on how much you can operate as far as like doing grants and getting funding. But like if you were just a for-profit, I don't know what my question is anymore.
That's okay. No, I mean, I definitely think there's kind of this perception that we all have that like nonprofits are small and struggle and don't make money, and for-profits are like super booming and like make a ton of money.
I found out buying clothes. It's like a very multi-million-dollar.
Sure. So I definitely think there's that perception, but it's not. That's kind of maybe what we hear, but it's not how it's meant to be. It's not set up that way, and there's lots of examples of for-profits that are very big. I mean, American Red Cross is a for-profit. They've huge. So, I mean, they're making billions, right? Like with a B. So it's certainly nonprofits, the question is whether they're, one, the net income that they make is going back into the business, or is it being paid out to owners? Because there's no owners. Nonprofits don't have owners. They have a board of directors, right, to help manage the nonprofit. And in the case of for-profits, I mean, there's plenty that don't make money. I'll tell you that right there. So it's the idea of like, this is a non-profitable space versus a profitable space. That's why I don't really like using the word nonprofit, to be honest. It's just whether it's subject to taxation, to taxing on the income, the net income, or not subject to taxing on the net income. The way we make that distinction is this organization providing value to our community through culture, education, religious, and other charitable means, social services, that type of thing. But there's tons of policy disagreement. I mean, there's lots of disagreement as to whether certain entities should have to pay taxes or not on their land ownership, for example. Even though they're 501c3s, some of them don't pay. You know, they're capped out on how much they have to pay taxes. But they're not necessarily capped in how much income they can make. They're capped in where that income goes. It got to go back into the business. I don't know if that helps. We can talk more though. Yeah, you had something?
I've heard of the term not-for-profit. Is that the same as a non-profit? Or there's
I mean, legally they're not. Legally, the term is tax exempt. So when we say nonprofit or not-for-profit, we're mostly talking about like how we colloquially talk about it as opposed to legally. So it just depends on the context, I would say. Okay, so we're tight on time, so I want to run us through the Hawaii Business Express resource, which is essentially all the forms that we just talked about on the state side. They can actually be done through a wizard. Instead of having to do separate filing forms, you can actually do it all through one and turn a bunch of information at their prompting instead of like these very governmental forms. And then at the end you pay for all of the filing fees plus like a wizard fee, which I don't think it's that much. I think it's like $35 a year. Don't quote me, but around there. But then also you're essentially creating an account. So you can then log in at any time. You can do updates, you can amend filings, etc. So you can, it's kind of this, for us, we find it a really much more useful tool that took businesses from like, I would say, maybe 25% of our businesses being completely compliant to like 75% of the businesses we work with being completely compliant. It just immediately made it easier to do filings. So I definitely suggest looking at the Business Express. So this is how you're gonna, this is Paula, she does these tech things. I don't know how to do it. I'm sure this is like low tech for you guys, but for me it's like, oh, there's arrows on my PowerPoint. Okay. That'll give you your account info. Okay. And then some just great resources that I wanted to share. We wanted to make sure folks have. So Business Action Center is actually run by DCCA. It's a state agency, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. And they're down on Nimitz. They have offices all over, but the Business Action Center is down on Nimitz. And folks can actually come in. You can sit with someone and say, this is what I think I want to do. What do I need to fill out? They'll walk you through it. They also have lawyers that will go there like a day a week or something like that. You can sign up for time to sit with the lawyer and ask all the legal questions that Rebecca kept saying that she's not a lawyer for. And you can ask them for their advice on those. SCORE is a resource that is basically like a cohort of successful businessmen and women, and they sort of do like mentorship. So they'll sit and talk with folks through like whatever you're dealing with. So the folks that we work with that have really great success using SCORE, it's really just to like pick their brains. So we talked earlier about how lonely it can be to run a business on your own, and they're just like a sounding board. Because like our husbands and wives are kind of like tired of hearing about it after a while, yeah. Like, okay, babe, can you find some, like, I love you, I support you, but like really I gotta make dinner. Can you like leave me alone on this right now? So sometimes just having somebody who has no personal stake in your business, who has no personal stake in your idea, who can just be a sounding board, give you ideas, even just like almost like a therapist, and just like talk it out, right? Sometimes it just takes being able to like verbalize what we're thinking about, and then we're like, oh, never mind, I don't need you, I'm good, thanks. So, but SCORE is a great resource. They can also help draft things. So for folks who have to put together business plans, which we'll talk about next workshop, folks who have to put together business plans, say, that are a little bit more robust for a funder or for a lender who's asking for something more detailed than what you feel like you have the skills for, SCORE can help draft it, they can help review it, give feedback, that kind of thing. Hawaii Small Business Development Center are also resources around the state that are just will help you with whatever, just connecting you as you need. And then lastly, the Small Business Association, the Small Business Administration is a federal agency, and they have a Hawaii office down at Restaurant Row, and they do a ton of workshops, especially how to do business with the federal government. So for folks who are interested in that route, I definitely suggest connecting to them. They sort of set a lot of the definitions and a lot of the stage for what a small business is, what kind of opportunities are available. So the state and others adopt a lot of their definitions and refer to them constantly. So they're a really great resource as well. Paula, you want to come in and talk about business insurance basics while I talk about what a 501c4 is? So we had a question from outside asking what's a 501c4. So I talked about how there's a lot of different 501cs. 3 is the charitable one that we talked about that's non-tax exempt. 501c4s, however, are one of those, and some of their income is taxable and some of their income is not taxable. The distinction is that 501c4s can engage in more political activity than a 501c3 can. So 501c3s are limited. They're not meant to be political entities. So for example, they're not, oftentimes they won't endorse candidates for things. They won't donate to campaigns and whatnot. And they have limits on what percentage of their expenses can be, or actually I think it's of revenue, that can be spent on political activities. Whereas a 501c4 is not limited in that way. Okay? But the big distinction is that donations into 3s and 4s are treated differently. And their charitable status and then what kind of taxes they have to pay on that income is treated differently. And then there was a question about, can a DCCA registered nonprofit entity carry on legally until it's funded? I'm not exactly sure what it means to not be funded. I mean, again, legally doing business in the state of Hawaii requires filing BB1 to get the GE license, and being a nonprofit requires filing the articles of incorporation with DCCA. So if those things have been done, then as far as I can tell, without being a lawyer on this topic, you're legal. So yes, you can definitely operate legally and carry on legally until funded. Okay, come on in. This is Paula, everyone. She's gonna talk about insurance.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about why you should have insurance, business insurance. So mostly you would want to have insurance to protect your assets. When we talked about different ways to legally set up your business, insurance just adds another layer of protection on there for you. Also, insurance is usually required to get a permit. Like if you are in media and you want to have access to a property that's state-owned and you need a permit, most of the time they're going to require that you provide them with a certificate of insurance. It's also required to fulfill conditions of a contract. So if you get a contract from the state or federal government, they'll oftentimes require that you have insurance. For most small businesses, BOP, a business owner's policy, is going to cover the basics of what you need. So that's going to give you general liability insurance, which is known as your slip and fall insurance, property insurance, which is going to cover things that the business owns, and most times there'll be business income. So all of these coverages come together in one package policy. Now, as media makers, a couple of things I wanted to highlight for you would be under the property insurance. So a good rule of thumb is if you take it out of your studio, or if you want like a specific stated value for something, you're going to want to get a separate insurance policy to cover it. Most times, an insurance agent is going to recommend that you get what's called an inland marine floater or inland marine policy. So you don't have to buy an insurance policy for each piece of equipment that you have. Rather, you purchase one policy and then you schedule all of your equipment on there. It's really important that you keep that schedule up to date because depending on your insurance carrier, they may deny coverage for something if it isn't properly listed. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight hired and non-owned automobile liability. Most times, this is a coverage that can be added as an endorsement to the business owner's policy, and it's something that I highly recommend that you consider. What it does is it covers you, let's say you have an assistant who gets in their car and goes on an errand and they get into an accident. This endorsement is going to just add another layer of protection for you.
Any questions on insurance? Okay, thanks, B. Okay, so we're at 11, so we want to take a break. Is there anyone who's not staying on for the second one? You? Okay. So I'll get you the slides that we're, because what I'm going to do is there's a couple more slides talking about financing that I'm just going to add into the next one, and I'll make sure to get you that information, okay? So let me just wrap by, sad face. Well, you guys have the PowerPoint. The last slide has our contact information. So again, this is a super abbreviated version of what we would normally do, but you know, really, like again, we're just super passionate about helping folks and being there to support whatever your business ideas are. So if you want to just come brainstorm, we're there. If you want some specific resources that we talked about, we're there. If you have some particularized questions that I didn't quite answer, and let me know, and I can hook you up to people that I can maybe be a better resource for you. But also I just want to encourage you all to see yourselves as a network now. So now, I mean, you folks may already have known each other. We didn't engage a ton today, but you're all here and you all know that you have something in common, that you want to somehow start a new enterprise. And so going through this together can be something that even just using each other as a resource, so how did you do this, or how did you do that? What we try to do with our classes, so for people who go through our whole sessions, is we actually have coffee clubs that get together once a month afterwards. Just get together among people who are also starting small businesses to just talk about questions. It's like, I don't know who to ask this. Do you know? Do you know? Okay. It just becomes another network for you, so you don't have to overstrain your personal relationships, because trust me, they get tired of hearing about it after a while. So thank you all so much for having me. Thank you to PIC. Thank you to ʻŌlelo Media. Thank you to all of you for doing the work you're doing in our communities. And I'm just really excited to see what happens next for everyone. So mahalo for having me. A lot of fun.